plan.
Okay, so we are having a chat with Daniel, which is our neighbor. And at the same time, because we face a lot of students with some learning difficulties, so we just want to understand a little bit more. Yeah, so maybe can you just share a little bit more about yourself and what do you actually do?
I'm from Speech Bubbles. We are directly above one2tuition. As a speech therapist, so that's my profession. I'm a speech therapist. I work with children with special needs, autism, Down syndrome, global developmental delay, ADHD, language delays, speech sound disorders. So so that's the primary type of diagnosis that we work with. Age range, we generally work with from about 2 to 3 years old, all the way up to teenagers even. So that's, we help them with language, with learning, with cognition, executive functioning goals as well.
I think for a lot of parents, when they first discover their child has learning challenges or maybe they behave a bit differently from their peers, they can be actually feeling quite overwhelmed.
Yeah.
As a family, how can we actually support these children?
Children have a lot of diversity, right? Some children have difficulties in different aspects, be it social, be it emotional, be it cognition and things like that. So I think it's very important to generally spend a lot of time with your children to identify how they are. It's important to spend time with them, with their peers as well if possible. So arrange play dates, arrange time out with their friends, build a community of kids around their same age. So in that way, you have a better understanding of where they are at. And then the third thing I would say is it'll be important to help them to as a parent, to understand and to not be in denial. I think it's in this day and age with knowledge is very easily accessible. Even now there's AI. You just type one question, it gives you the direct answer, right? So I think if we have a better understanding of where our kids are and what difficulties they have and how to even target it. So be it sending the kid for a bit more gymnastics, a bit more movement to help them feed their regulation needs, to have a bit more output in terms of the movement, then I think that would help them a lot already. So knowledge is very important. You need to know your kid. And as parents, I think the difficulty is sometimes we think that our kids reflect us, right? So meaning that if my kid misbehaves, then I feel like, oh no, it's on me, I'm a bad parent. And then so my kid has to be well behaved. So I think as a parent, we cannot have that thinking too much. We just try our best, but every kid is different. Their genetics and their mapping of their brain is really, it has genetically been set in that sense. All we need to do is nurture them and to understand them and help them to journey their path.
Talking about understanding, right? I think there are a lot of misunderstanding that all these kids have to face. So what do you think some misconceptions people have for kids with ADHD or like any of these learning difficulties?
I think it goes hand in hand. Sometimes when there are children with difficulties, parenting also becomes a lot more difficult. Children here who have difficulties, and sometimes the parents may find it difficult and they may end up screaming at the child. They may end up losing their temper more easily. And that's totally normal, right? That's expected in that sense as well. Because it is sometimes it's difficult to separate what we see as a diagnosis and what we understand to be this is expected behavior of a child with this diagnosis versus a child who is just spoiled, a child who has been given free reins of whatever they do. In terms of their parenting approach, some misunderstandings could be that they are doing it deliberately when sometimes it's not deliberate. So, for example, a child may be very active and their awareness of their surroundings may not be very good, and they keep bumping into you. And then people might get irritated and they say like, why you keep pushing me? And then it's like, no, he wasn't pushing you. He was not even aware of his surroundings. Another misconception is also that they're stupid or they're lazy or they're dumb, because sometimes learning becomes a bit more difficult. And then therefore they may struggle in certain aspects of learning. Another thing could be also that the child is not paying attention. So for example, some children with ADHD, they may be looking away or they may be fidgeting with something, right? They may be playing with something and they're actually still listening, right? And they are still trying to gather information. But it's just that if I were to stare at you directly and to just not do anything, it's very stressful, and my body and my brain cannot keep up with that. So when I do this, I'm actually not learning. But when I fidget with something, it helps me to regulate, and then it helps me to learn better. So even teachers sometimes say like, stop playing with that, get things out of your hands, and then it makes that learning more difficult for the child actually.
Speech bubbles offer some therapies to help these children, right? So how do these therapies actually support them in their learning?
So I think a lot of them, so it's multifaceted, right? So generally we help parents a lot to understand their child, give them handles and tips of how to manage the children in terms of regulation, behavior, the types of things they need. So this is like occupational therapy room, for example. Parents need to understand sometimes just as we have our needs, be it hunger. If you're hungry and you cannot work properly, or for us as adults, we don't have coffee, we cannot work properly as well. So for some kids, they need a bit of movement in order to regulate themselves. So sometimes it's getting them to understand their kid. Secondly, we also target the kids. So there are a lot of root problems that the kids may have. It could just be something as simple as visual tracking. It could be something simple as like processing information, where the way they gather information, the way they listen to information, and they're not able to process it. It could be like their memory, their attention. So it could be a lot of root causes that will be causing this, and we would like to target the root causes. Yeah. So when the root causes are met, then the learning outcomes improve.
Okay.
Yeah.
And most of these kids, right, in Singapore, they have no choice, but they have to go to the mainstream school. So how do you think the educators in mainstream school can also help to support these children?
It's difficult for mainstream teachers because of the size of the classroom. Singapore has been taking very good measures actually with the allied educator supports, as well as they've pull out sessions. Some schools have transition classes. So I would say as a parent first, that if your child has difficulties, it'd be important to find out which school would have a bit more support, because every school is a bit different in that regard. So you can ask things like in forums, or join parents groups, join alumni or whatever, just to find out now. Talk to people. It's very important to know this now. Talk to people who have difficulties, and then they can share what their school has to offer. So that's for parents. For teachers, it boils down to knowledge as well. So for example, ADHD, fidgeting, right? Some kids, when they fidget, if the teacher understands that that child has some difficulties and it's known, then the teacher should know how to manage that a bit more, and not like keep calling them out and saying like, hey, and keep scolding them, because that also impacts self-esteem, right? And something else is also like, if a child is flagged to have difficulties, to have them seated in front, all these basic things. Yeah, so I think teachers and parents need to work hand in hand. Parents, while we talked about denial earlier, parents need to to understand where their kids are. And when they know where their kids are, they can also tie in with the teachers. When the teachers are more aware of the difficulties that the kids have, they're actually better equipped. In fact, some parents think like, oh, I don't want to tell them. If I don't tell them, then they won't label him. But inversely, that actually can do more harm, because if I don't know the kid has difficulties, I would think that that's bad behavior. But if I know that kid has certain difficulties, it helps me to understand more as an educator, to say that, okay, he needs certain scaffolds, or a bit more help in certain areas. So I think as parents, we need to tie in with the educators to inform them about that.
Okay, so before we end this video, we wish to actually inspire our parents and students and whoever watching this video. So can you share a story of a child who was actually like struggling, but with the right support and help, they actually managed to thrive in school?
Wow, there's actually quite a lot.
The memorable one.
Yeah, so I mean, I see a lot of very young ones as well, and sometimes from young ones, they can be very misunderstood, in the sense where their behaviors can be very erratic. But a lot of kids, when they first, before they start therapy, they can be screaming and crying non-stop. Even during the first few sessions of therapy, they can be screaming and crying. They have very bad separation anxiety. They cling to their parents. They don't want to go for any classes, So even just yesterday, I have a parent who told me like, oh, this child, her name starts with E, she cannot go for any tuition classes. She's come here for 6 sessions now, and she's very comfortable here now, and she learns very quickly here, right? But the thing is that I was telling parents like, don't force your kids to go for tuition classes just for the sake of that. So that kid is 4 years old, and the parents send them for phonics classes, but she has a lot more underlying difficulties where she can't even like understand like in front and behind. So if you have more fundamental difficulties, she cannot formulate long sentences, a proper sentence of like telling a story of like, mommy, I went to the zoo and I saw a fish, I saw a giraffe. Or if I ask her name 5 animals, she may struggle, right? So the word fluency is impacted. If there are so many language difficulties, but they just force themselves to go for these things, and the kids are basically very scared. I think ultimately kids just want to be understood as well and to be listened to. So once we do therapy and help the parents understand and help the kids feel safe, then they improve very dramatically. They stop crying, they start talking a lot more, they start learning a lot faster, they start processing information faster, and then you can actually target the areas of difficulty more specifically. And then the school will have reports like, oh wow, so fast. And then I've some clients who come from overseas, and they stay in Singapore now, and then they went back, they're like, oh wow, it's a whole different child. So there's so many of these kinds of incidences now, but as an educator, it's very encouraging. And that's why I think both of us, we are doing what we do as well. Yeah, it feeds our passion. So yeah.
Thank you so much for
No
sharing.
problem.
It's such
It's,
an insightful sharing.
No problem. It's a joy.
Yeah.
Hope it benefits everyone.